Thank you all for coming tonight to take control of your information environment, how fake news spreads, which is part of the Humanities Montana series called The Informed Citizen, dealing with lots of different kind of media issues. Tonight's program will be presented by Julie Edwards. She's a former public librarian and instructional designer with the Niche Academy. In 2017, she was awarded a Fulbright to teach the Department of Library and Information Studies at the University of Botswana. I'll let Julie take it away. Thank you for coming.
Thanks to Ira for organizing this. As he said, I am a librarian, former public librarian, and I spent 2 of the best years of my career organizing programs like this at the Peabody Institute Library in Massachusetts. So I'm super honored to be here. And huge thanks to Humanities Montana for organizing programs like this throughout the state of Montana. Their Informed Citizen series is really essential now more than ever. So we'll talk about fake news tonight. This title, Around the World in 30 Seconds, comes from a TED Talk that Markham Nolan, a journalist, did several years ago, well before the last election, actually. And in it, he's talking about how quickly news of an earthquake in Mexico literally spread around the world. So 30 seconds for a very small, isolated incident in a tiny part of Mexico to make its way around the world. So that's what we're dealing with in this day and age, with how fast news travels. When I was prepping this presentation over the past month or so, I was really delighted to come across this quote. So here we have Benjamin Franklin saying, "The first responsibility of every citizen is to question authority." So I was really happy to see this because it sets the tone for what we're going to be talking about tonight. So keep this in your mind as we're talking about fake news. It's the first responsibility to question authority. Social scientists and journalists are saying that it might have been appropriate at one time to talk about fake news as false information, right? Things that are produced to look like news, but don't have any of the ethical or professional trappings of what news actually does. So it might have been appropriate to say fake news is just something that is made up, right? That doesn't work so much anymore because of the way that the term has been thrown around, not only in the US, but now increasingly in other countries, to signify anything that you disagree with, right? And it's become almost a slang. So I'll joke with people if they say something that I don't want to hear, like, oh, it's a miserable night in Missoula, like there's a lot of wind out there. That's fake news, right? Like if I don't want to hear it. So the term has come to lose a lot of meaning. One of the researchers that I was reading to prep for this said that this term has become so irredeemably politicized in the current context that it's lost all connection to reality and truth. So they are, many researchers and librarians are encouraging us to use the term false news. False as in not true, as opposed to fake, made up, right? So the key is focusing on what is an actual thing in the world, right? So using this dichotomy of false and true is a lot easier. Oh, I shouldn't say easier. It's a lot more specific than the term fake. And so you will find journalists and librarians in particular rejecting this term. But because this is the term that we're all used to as citizens and readers of the news, this is what we're going to work with. Fake news can mean a lot of different things, right? Doctored images. It can mean fake, or I shouldn't say fake, but exaggerated stories from real media outlets, right? It can mean completely false media outlets, right? Completely manufactured by someone else. So it's a hydra, it's an octopus. There's no one definition. And so some of you tonight will probably come in with your own definition of fake news, and I'm very happy for that because we're not going to cover all possible iterations of what fake news is. And I think that's really important to lay out there from the start because we could spend the next hour talking about whether CNN is in fact fake news, right? We're not going to do that. But you can see the way the term has been shifted. In misinformation, there's no intent to cause harm. It's a mistake. It may cause harm, but the intent is not to cause harm. Disinformation is information that is specifically incorrect, deliberately created to cause harm to someone or something, be it a person, an institution, an organization. So these are the two main distinctions in fake news. Stuff that is a mistake and stuff that is deliberately designed to sow distrust, mistrust, to increase polarization, to separate people and institutions from each other. Beyond that, there are 7 subtypes of mis and disinformation. And we'll go over these fairly quickly. So the first is satire, right? Satire has no intention to cause harm. It's meant to be funny, but it can fool people, okay? So those of you who read the New Yorker or Andy Borowitz's blog will notice that in the past few years, he's had to put a subtitle on his blog saying, this is not real news, right? Because it would, people would take it seriously. So this is The Onion, this is The Daily Show, this is the Borowitz Report. Satire, right? That can confuse people, but is not meant to hurt people. Misleading content. So that is the use of information to frame an issue or an individual in a misleading way. So in the past few weeks, one of the bits of misleading content that I have seen have been aerial maps of the Australia bushfires. Have any of you seen these maps? So if you see these maps, it looks like the entire country is on fire, right? And much of the country is on fire. But the map that has been circulating quite widely is actually a heat map. It's not necessarily a map of where fires are. So it looks bigger than it is. So people see this and they say, oh my God, the island is on fire. But what they don't have the full information to read that map correctly. And in fact, the guy who developed that map has continually tried to say, you're looking at the wrong map. But once it's out there, right? Imposter content. So this is when genuine sources are impersonated by other sources. This is a little tricky. This has happened a lot since 2016. You will get websites that look like ABC News, NBC News, right? Fox, that are not actually the websites of those organizations. If you look at the URL, and we'll talk about this a little later, what you'll notice is instead of abc.com, you might see abc.co.com, right? Something that our brains would miss, looks like a legitimate website. The website itself is designed to look exactly like ABC's website. So if you're not paying attention, you don't realize that you're looking at something that is actually not a legitimate news source. And there are more of these cropping up lately. And they're very tricky. It's easy now to make a website, right? It's easy to make a website that looks exactly like a legitimate source. Fabricated content. This is news content that is 100% false. It is intended to harm people. The first example that I think of when I think of fabricated content is Alex Jones' InfoWars Sandy Hook massacre was staged, right? Like that is designed to hurt people, right? So fabricated content is 100% made up news. False connections. This is when the headlines and the visuals don't match the content of the article, right? So a funny example with this that has been popping up lately, if you're reading celebrity news, although it's not quite celebrity news, the Daily Mail, which is a British tabloid, has a lot of screaming headlines about how angry Queen Elizabeth is right now at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, right? But if you read the actual articles, you know, the headline will scream like the Queen is hurt, the Queen is so disappointed, right? The content is not there. That's not at all what's happening in the article. But to get you to click and read, the headline gets sensationalized so that you click on the article. Make sense there? It's a silly example, but it's in the news right now. False content. When genuine content is shared with false contextual information. So one of the examples of this that has been making the rounds in the past 10 days, 2 weeks, is so-called video of the Soleimani raid, right? So there's videos floating around on Twitter saying we've got the drone footage of when Soleimani was hit, right? It's not. It is drone footage. It's drone footage of a US attack, but it's not that one. Make sense? And it's being shared all over the place. And then manipulated content. When genuine information or imagery is manipulated to deceive people. So one of the more recent examples of this is that video of Nancy Pelosi, where her speech is slowed way down, right? So she seems ill or drunk or whatever, right? So this is actual content that's been just tweaked a little bit to make it seem like you're not looking at what you're looking at. Make sense? Any questions on any of these? It's worth knowing them, being a little bit familiar with them, because once you get a sense of them, you start to see how often they crop up and where they crop up. So this is from First Draft News. If you Google this, First Draft types of mis and disinformation, it's right up there. Journalists and librarians are calling this media manipulation. That's the term that they're preferring to use right now. So all of those things, mis and disinformation and those 7 subtypes add up to this, right? It's taking media in whatever form and tweaking it so as to confuse people, right? Now, misinformation is a little bit different, right? Satire is misinformation. Sometimes a reputable news source will make a mistake. They will correct it if they are a reputable news source. It still gets classified as misinformation. Media manipulation is really dealing with the disinformation side of things, right? Stuff that is designed to fray society, honestly. Like, there's no other way to say it, right? Because when you start distrusting what's in front of your own face or what somebody else is reading, the fabric starts to fray. So I want to give you a quiz at this point, okay? What is the main purpose, or a main purpose, of fake news? These are your choices. For political influence, propaganda, partisanship, profit, or to provoke others. It's a little bit of a trick question because these are all reasons, right? But the big one is money. Fake news makes money. That's why it exists, right? All that other stuff, at least in our country, is somewhat tangential to the fact that there are big bucks attached to this, okay? Of anything that you take home tonight, this is the most important point. If you are not paying for your news, you are the product, not the customer, okay? This is essential. You are the product, not the customer. How this works is someone will make fake news to entice you to visit a website or to click on a piece of social media. Those visits and those clicks are counted so that that website can turn around and say to their advertisers, we have X hundred thousands of unique visits a month. So you should pay us a lot of money to advertise on our site, right? Does that make sense? Is anybody not following me there? Because this is really important. Fake news doesn't care if you believe it or not. They just want you to click. That's the point. Because they are using your attention to make money for themselves. right? So the thing that is so insidious about this is that when we engage with fake news, when we encounter it, we are under the impression that we are participating in democratic media, and we're not. We are making money for somebody else, okay? It is really important to realize that you are a tool in someone else's game with fake news, right? Propaganda is there, absolutely. Political influence is there, absolutely. But the purpose is to make money. We will revisit this later, but this is a big reason why when I hear calls for Facebook and Twitter to do a better job with policing fake news on their sites, they have no financial incentive to do that, right? Because if you're still going to Facebook, if you're still going to Twitter, why should, they're making a ton of money on advertising. Why should they police content that's sucking people into the site? Social media is the primary traffic source to fake news. That means people who end up on fake news sites get there through Facebook and Twitter, right? So that is our vector into fake news for most people. What's important for us to know is what happens internally when fake news is spread. So what's going on for the individual that causes fake news to be spread? And then what's happening in the system that entices the individual to spread fake news. So we're going to look at it from those two perspectives. What we do as consumers of news, and then what the system does to make fake news. So there are several ways that fake news captures us. The first is an emotional impact. Hitting people's emotions makes them more vulnerable to fake news, right? Because what you're having is a gut reaction, not a brain reaction. This is a photograph taken in Syria. This is a young boy in a graveyard sleeping between two graves. This was shared as a tweet with the caption, "Meanwhile, in Syria, a child sleeps between his parents." Okay? So immediately you get like the knife twist, right? We can assume this kid's an orphan. We know what's going on in Syria. The whole country's dissolved in war. So this makes sense to us, and it hurts to look at. On Reddit, this particular picture, in under 24 hours, had over 2,100 comments on it, right? So people reacted to this because of that emotional impact. The picture that didn't make the rounds was this. So, same kid, same place. The story is that that picture of the child sleeping between his parents was an art project by a Syrian photographer. He was making a social commentary on how in our modern, hyper-connected, distracted world, it can sometimes seem to children that their parents are more available to them after they die than in everyday life, right? So this is the context that we didn't get, that nobody wanted to see, and the artist was furious, right? The artist responded this way: "It is absurd how people can be easily manipulated without going back to the source and the fact." His photo went viral under the wrong caption, right? Which creates a problem, because we are having an emotional reaction to something that is not true, number one. There's just that level. And then from the artistic level, right? That picture is so powerful because it feeds into our assumptions about Syria, right? Syria's at war, people are dying, kids are sleeping in graveyards, right? We don't think of Syria as a place where artists are creating, right? So his initial intent gets totally warped because this photo spread around without his artistic content, right? So it feeds into our preconceived notions while his work as an artist is not even considered, right? We don't think of Syria as a place where people are making art, but they are. This is the number one emotion in that emotional impact that gets people to share fake news. If you are mad about something, you are more likely to comment on it, to share it, to spread it around to other people. I look at my own Facebook page and it's mostly filled with this, right? I don't share the warm, fuzzy things. I share the stuff where I'm like, oh my God, can you believe, right? So, checking the things, thinking for yourselves, what is your trigger point, right? What is the thing that makes you most angry in the world, in politics, right? That's the thing you have to watch out for when you are exposed to fake news. Because if something is making you really, really angry, the first thing you should do is say, wait a minute, am I looking at something that's actually legitimate? Or is this designed to make me extra angry? So here's an example of that. Anybody see this week? Yeah, so this was just a few days ago, less than 10 days ago. This is a representative from Arizona. He shared this picture on Twitter. The world is a better place without these guys in power. He has a right to his opinion, right? Problem is, it's a totally fake photo, right? 100% not true, okay? This is, of course, Obama. This is Rouhani, the president of Iran. They never met in person. Rouhani's still in power, so he's not there. The Iranian flag is not correct. That's not the flag of Iran. This is a doctored picture from when Obama met Modi from India. Okay, so this has been going around. This stokes anger on both sides of the aisle, right? So if you are inclined to agree with the representative, you're like, yeah, right? Our problems in the Middle East are caused because of that guy, our president, right? Our ex-president, right? Look, in bed with the enemy. If you are not inclined to agree, you're furious because this is spreading around like it's actually true, right? This stokes people's emotions. You can see 39,000 people commented on this, right? It was shared almost 5,000 times, liked 16,000 times. The interesting thing about this, though, is how insidious anger is, right? Because the tweet is crazy enough, right? This is a representative in the U.S. House of Congress sharing a fake image, okay? That's bananas. What's even more bananas is when he was called on it, the doubling down, right? This was his response to that. So you see the anger in real time. To the dim-witted reporters who are calling this fake, no one said this wasn't photoshopped. No one said the president of Iran was dead. No one said Obama met him in person, right? He is admitting here that he knows it's fake and he doesn't care, okay? Which is why, as citizens, we need to be more vigilant about this stuff, right? Because this, to me, speaks to a huge discourse problem in the country, right? Smart thing to do would have been to just take the tweet down, right? Just take it down. Instead, what you have is this extra angry reaction, right? You've got the attack on the dim-witted reporters, and the fact that I don't care that it's made up. It gets my point across. This was the second. Again, the point remains to all but the dimmest. Obama did this, and this, protected the world's #1 sponsor of terror. The world is better without Obama. The world would be better off without Rouhani. He is entitled to this opinion, 100%, right? But the way in which it's presented to the rest of us who may not know that that photo is made up doesn't do anything to foster our understanding or our conversations with each other. Novelty. We are more likely to share, according to cognitive research, stuff that seems new to us for whatever reason, right? So this is not a super great example of novelty, but again, it came up in the last week. From Bill McKibben from the Sierra Foundation, scientists say many billions of animals have died in the Australian bushfires, and the long-tailed potoroo may now be extinct in the wild. Problem with this tweet, well-meaning as it is that there's no such animal as the long-tailed potoroo. It doesn't exist. There's a long-footed potoroo. I think this is a case of misinformation. I think he mistyped. But then what you have here are people having an emotional reaction to this new thing that's happening over an animal that doesn't exist. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but think about this from a policy perspective, right? Let's say that people got together and wanted to create some kind of policy program to save the long-tailed potoroo, right? There is no such thing. Think of the wasted energy and time on that. Think of the diversion that this simple mistake took away from what's actually happening. Now, you can argue that his main point, which is correct, is that billions of animals have died in Australia, right? That is a big deal. That is a loss for the world. But this kind of stuff doesn't further the discourse either, right? So you have to be constantly aware of what's going on. And news media debunked this. They said there's no such thing. And this tweet is still there, right? So I think what's more telling in fake news is not even so much the fact that it exists as the fact that it seems to not matter, right? It seems to not matter. This could have been edited, this could have been taken down, but we move on. And my argument to you is that maybe we shouldn't, right? I am old-fashioned enough and came out of a liberal arts education enough to think that specificity matters, right? Because what are we talking about, right? What are we talking about if we're not being specific in what we're talking about? Cognitive bias. So here's the big one, right? Cognitive bias is the information that we are more likely to seek out, that fits into our belief system most easily, and that we are least likely to question because it fits into our current belief system. So cognitive bias is the #1 individual sort of trait that makes us susceptible to fake news. We believe stuff that we agree with. We tend to be more critical of stuff we disagree with, regardless of which one of those is true. So I'll give you an example that I just saw when I was preparing for this. I didn't see it a few years ago, but it captures what would have caught my cognitive bias from 2 different directions, okay? So, who's this guy? Steve Bannon. Only it's not. It's a photoshopped image of Steve Bannon, right? Steve Bannon is the architect of Trump's win. Regardless of that, he's not my favorite guy. I think he's got some kind of crazy policies. So I would be inclined to not think twice about this, right? Because this visual sort of matches what I already think about his personality, right? But it's not true. To add to that cognitive bias, this picture circulated in 2017 from Anthony Bourdain's Twitter account. So I love Anthony Bourdain, right? I'm a huge fan of Uncle Tony. So not only am I cognitively inclined to not like Steve Bannon, I'm cognitively inclined to like Anthony Bourdain, right? So I am more likely to look at this tweet and not give it a second thought because it's coming from somebody that I trust making some fun of somebody that I don't like, right? Retweeted over 3,400 times, all kinds of likes. I'm not on Twitter, but I probably would have been like, that's really funny, right? And who knows with Anthony Bourdain, right? Maybe he's trolling Steve Bannon. Maybe he knows it's a fake image, right? That doesn't make him any better than Representative Gosar, in my opinion, right? This doesn't work, okay? Even if it's meant as satire, even if it's meant as a joke, if you're not in on the joke, then you pass this off as real, right? So much as I love Anthony Bourdain, this is as bad as posting the picture of Obama with Rouhani, right? The difference maybe is one of scale, and that Bourdain is a celebrity and not a congressman, so maybe the bar is a little lower for him. But this is the kind of stuff that I would have to be wary of, right? I trust Anthony Bourdain. I think he's funny. I'm going to believe him. And so I need to be aware when I'm looking at things that I find amusing or novel or that make me angry. Is it because it's matching what I already think? And if it is, I need to slow way down before I share it, like it, comment on it, pass it along to somebody else. All of this stuff came together a few years ago. So does anybody recognize this image? This is the Comet Pizza Parlor in Washington, D.C. This is the pizza parlor that a guy drove several states to get to with his automatic weapons to rescue the children that were being kept in a sex ring run by Hillary Clinton. Okay? Fired 2 shots inside. Nobody was hurt, but he had bought hook, line, and sinker into the conspiracy theory and was there to rescue children, right? What gives you more of an emotional impact than children in danger, right? So that part of the recipe is met. What's crazier than Hillary Clinton running a child sex ring, right? So the novelty aspect is there. Cognitive bias. The guy that drove up there was inclined to believe that the Clintons are evil, right? And that it is not at all weird that they might be behind a pedophilia ring, right? He was already primed to think that way, and so not to question. And then anger, because what should make you more angry than kids in danger, right? So all of this stuff comes together in real ways in the world, in real enough ways that somebody who could just as easily be sitting in this room with us packed up his car full of guns and drove to a pizza parlor, right? So there are real impacts to the way this news spreads. So as individuals, paying attention to these 4 things are your best first defense against fake news, right? Understanding what you like, what you believe, what makes you angry. Behind the scenes, it's a whole different story. We'll start with bots. Bots are programmed algorithms. They search for information on the internet that's similar to what somebody on social media might already like, click on, or share. I like to travel, right? So if I click on a bunch of links about traveling, bots pick up my behavior and start sending me more posts about travel, right? They inject new information into what we see. They provide us with easy information to things that we already like. So in this new media environment, stuff is coming to us. We have stopped going to the news. The news and information is coming to us, which is a problem. 47 million Twitter accounts, 15% of the entire platform are bots. They are not real people, okay? By Facebook's own estimate, 60 million of their users are bots, okay? So you are likely interacting with a bot at some point on one of these platforms. What happens is that bots and humans together put together what's known in the research as a hybrid threat, right? States, quasi-states, the example here is ISIS, use fake news and bots to cause chaos and mayhem, right? They target elections. We know this, right? They target democratic processes, voting, migrants, refugees, minorities, infrastructure, right? Every time something is hacked, that's an infrastructure issue. So humans and bots together work to spread fake news. So what I want you to do for the next 6 slides is change your perspective. Instead of a consumer of fake news, imagine that you are trying to spread fake news yourself, okay? This is your roadmap. This is what you would do. Your first step to spread fake news is to impersonate. The purpose here is to pose as a real person or organization to make yourself seem legitimate, right? Without actually having to have all the credentials that an actual journalist needs to have, right? So you post a frustrated tweet. That's easy. We do it all the time, right? We mostly post things that make us angry, so this is natural for us. You fake an account for credibility, right? You don't post necessarily as an individual. You give yourself some kind of organizational name, right? Maybe a fake newspaper name, something like that. And then you get some reaction to that tweet. And so what the heck? It's cheap. It actually is free. Start a news site that then treats your initial tweet as if a separate independent news site has picked it up as important news. You with me so far? This is your first step. Your next step is to make people mad. We know that angry stuff spreads, right? It goes around the world faster than anything else. So you take a topic from the news that makes people angry or afraid, right? At the risk of getting into tricky territory, vaccines are huge with this, right? It's hard to understand, so it makes people afraid. Say that the topic is a hoax, right? Say that, vaccines cause all kinds of problems. Attack experts who might try to counter your opinion, right? Sorry, I'm a scientist. I'm just going to say vaccines are okay, right? That person who stands up and says like, no, you're wrong, attack that person. Make yourself a meme or another tweet or some other little piece of easily digestible information that can go viral, that'll make people mad, right? So there's your step 2. Rile up people's emotions. Impersonate somebody real. Get people angry. You're well on your way to making fake news. Polarization. The purpose here is to drive people who might normally have something in common apart, right? That is the sole reason for this. Increase the gap between the right and the left. How do you do it? Publish a real story, but blow it up, right? So maybe there's something happening small on the local level, right? Your fake news site picks it up and it's a big deal. Like, oh, so that Comet pizza stuff started because somebody thought that the pizza icon on their sign looked like signs that actual child predators used online to recruit like-minded individuals, right? It was something as tenuous as that, right? It gets blown up and amplified and turned into a conspiracy. Find something trending on Twitter, blow it up, make some hashtags, write an article in your fake website, purchase some bots. It is incredibly cheap to buy followers, okay? It is not a lot of money at all. And you can get 10, 50, 100,000 followers for your website, for your Twitter feed, for your Facebook page. It all comes back to money. Find a conspiracy that will play on people's cognitive bias, right? Hype up some conspiracy that's on Twitter. Cast doubt on an official narrative. Get followers hooked by writing an in-depth report. Get them to be convinced that your site is telling it like it is, right? that somebody is finally reporting on what we all know to be true. This is what happened, at least in part, with the Comet pizza thing, right? Finally, somebody is saying that Hillary Clinton is trafficking children for sex. I knew it all along, right? Somebody is finally saying it. That's how this works. So when you see statements like this is a red flag that something might be off, right? When you see people casting doubt on official narratives, that is a red flag that there's something going on behind the scenes. Someone is purposely trying to fool you, right? Discredit experts. When fake news websites are accused of bad journalism, they can't defend themselves against that. So they attack the person who has accused them of bad journalism, right? If a fact checker debunks your conspiracy and says, no, Hillary Clinton is not running a sex ring, do you deny it? No. You take revenge. You discredit the fact checker through ad hominem attacks. You attack the person, right? Well, I'll pick on Leslie. Leslie is a fact checker and she says to me, no, there's no child sex ring, right? But that the Clintons are running. And I say, well, I know you vote Democrat. So of course you're going to defend the Clintons, right? I'm not going to engage with you on the substance of the argument. I'm going to say, you have an agenda, so I'm just not going to talk to you about it. So when you see ad hominem attacks, and they are everywhere now, somehow this became the acceptable method of communication, which blows my mind, because my 7-year-old nephew knows that you don't call people names. This is a red flag. Your final step is to troll people who disagree with you. Pick an emotional topic. Sow doubt. Suggest a cover-up. If you see something suggesting a cover-up, it's a red flag, right? Get picked up by other sites who will start asking why nobody else is reporting on this. Photoshop an image, impersonate a victim. The point here is to get mainstream media to chime in on your fake thing, right? Pizzagate was totally underground until somebody came in with a gun and started shooting. Now, mainstream media has to spend a lot of oxygen saying that, no, this is not true. Buy more bots, increase your followers, get officials to respond, keep discrediting. You may pressure somebody to resign from an official position, right? This is the psychology of the people who create fake news, okay? Impersonate, stoke emotions, polarize people, hype conspiracy theories, discredit people who disagree with you, and troll everybody else. That's the cocktail for making fake news spread. The theory behind these 6 aspects of fake news spreading is inoculation theory. The idea is that if you know how this works, you'll be tuned into looking for it. So the researchers who came up with this from the Netherlands in partnership with Cambridge University in the UK said that if you know these things, you will be on alert to them, so you won't be taken off guard by false news. This comes from something called the bad game. If you Google bad game, you can play real time as a fake news developer. It's a nifty little tool. I highly recommend it. If you Google bad game, it's the first thing that comes up. If you have doubters in your personal circles, encourage them to look at the bad game. You play the villain. You play somebody who is trying to make fake news go viral. It's a nice tool, yeah. It's about making money, right? All of those 6 things are designed to get you to websites so those websites can sell advertising. So how do you stop it? I'm going to give you a list of do's and don'ts. There's 2 ways of looking at this. Skills that you can develop, actual things that you can do, and ways of looking at the world, okay? Do not get your news from social media. I feel like a crazy person saying this because I know that this is where the majority of people get their news, okay? But Facebook and Twitter are not news aggregators. That is not what they exist for. Use Facebook to keep in touch with your friends, use it to look at funny cat pictures, you know, whatever. Do not use it to get news. Part of the issue there is the increased polarization and filter bubbles that happen, okay? Here's the thing with Facebook's news. The algorithms are so good that, let's say Sam and I are completely aligned politically, right? We vote straight, same candidates, we support the same candidates, maybe we volunteer for them, right? Theoretically, we should get the same news on Facebook because we are politically aligned. We will not, right? Maybe for some reason as simple as she shops at Orange Street Food Farm and I shop at the Good Food Store, right? Facebook is collecting that data. They're going to make assumptions about us based on stuff that we do outside of Facebook, and they're going to tailor the news that we see. So even somebody you are 100% politically aligned with, you will not see the same news as that person on Facebook, okay? Because it's not aggregating news. It's pushing stuff to you based on what you have previously done on Facebook, okay? I really recommend that you do not get your news from there. That is a disposition and a skill. The other thing with that is the money, okay? Facebook is not going to stop fake news. They've said that they're not going to, right? They have no financial incentive to do it. So you can complain all you want about social media, but if you're still using it to get news, do not rely too heavily on cable news either. Okay, again, a disposition and a skill. And you notice I don't call out any specific cable news channels here. 24-hour cable news, the key word in that phrase is 24-hour, not news. It has to fill time, so it fills time with stuff that is not necessarily news, right? Be careful what you see on TV. Don't trust your political knowledge to protect you. So studies have actually shown that this does not correlate in any way to inoculation against fake news because of cognitive bias, right? So if you think, well, I'm aware enough about stuff that's going on in the world, I know that I'm not going to get sucked into fake news, right? People who are highly politically aware are not necessarily the best at determining what's fake or not. Because people who are highly politically aware can do some fascinating mental gymnastics to prove to themselves that something is true or not true, right? This is very interesting. Don't spread news by trying to debunk it. Studies have shown that after 3 exchanges on Facebook with someone who disagrees with you, the conversation is lost, right? You are not going to convince anybody of your position, regardless of what it is. Studies have also shown that the human brain remembers stuff that we see a lot, right? So if you try to debunk fake news, if I take that picture of Obama and Rouhani and I publish it on my feed and say fake, people aren't paying attention to the fact I'm saying fake. They're seeing the picture again and again, which makes it stick in their brain as real. So this becomes very tricky when you're trying to debunk news, okay? The key instead is to figure out what the alternative narrative is and make it as simple to understand as possible without feeding into the myth, right? So the same study that did this showed that when you do like myth and fact sheets, they actually make people less informed because people don't separate the myth from the fact. They just see information and they remember information whether it's true or not. So the best way to debunk is not to engage with the content. This is something that people who are concerned about fake news need to learn and do. The smartest thing you can do is figure out a simple way to say the truth. Do not flame war, do not double down, right? Don't do what the representative from Arizona did, right? Because you're further polarizing people. What you should do, though, check the dates that something is written. A lot of the fake stuff that I see come across Facebook is stuff that's out of context because it's 3 or 4 years old, right? And I feel like every 6 months, I get this flood of stuff about Toni Morrison dying on my Facebook page, right? Even though she's been dead, okay? So it's check the dates, check the URLs always of the sites that you're on. abc.co.com looks almost exactly like abc.com if you're not paying close attention. So check the websites that you're going to. That is a skill. Know what your biases are. The thing that makes you the most angry in politics, when you read about that thing online, that is the thing you should be most skeptical of in all cases. Do read laterally. Reading laterally means you are, the less time you spend on an unfamiliar website, the better. The first thing you should do is hop off of a website you don't know and see what other people say about it. The more time you spend on a website trying to figure out if it's legitimate or not, the more time you're wasting. Because a fake website is never going to tell you that it's fake. But other sources will help you determine whether you're looking at something that has been criticized for posting propaganda or has had problems with journalistic ethics or is just flat out false. Do go to your news. Don't let it come to you. If you have news notifications on your phone, I actually recommend shutting them off, right? Take the time during your day to seek out your news, okay? You then become active in the process of becoming informed instead of having algorithms send stuff to you. Search for sources that practice investigative reporting. The stakes are higher for journalists who do this. They have to get it right, okay? Investigative reporting means they're doing their own digging. Follow those sources. Don't trust, Sean Hannity, I think, is a big fan of saying that Fox does a lot of investigative reporting. They don't. You can dig this up, you can find it, right? Other sources do. And I pick on Fox, but I would recommend staying away from MSNBC as well. I don't think they further the discourse. I just don't. Do inoculate yourself. Play the bad news game. See what it's like to make fake news. And then do settle your trust somewhere. So 2 librarians recently have said this. People are stingy with their trust these days because it's so hard to figure out what to trust. But you have to settle it somewhere. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, okay? People make mistakes. There are mistakes in reporting. Organizations and journalists that admit their mistakes, it's okay to follow them, right? It's okay to still get your news from someplace that has made a mistake and repeats the mistake. It's not okay to get your news from places that don't admit it or double down, right? One librarian that I follow says, we have somehow confused skepticism with cynicism, okay? Skepticism means that you don't believe anything without a strong reason to believe it. Cynicism means that you assume the worst of something, right? So if you pay attention to the national discourse, you hear a lot of people now saying, I don't trust the news. I don't trust the mainstream media. They have a bias, right? Everybody has a bias. This is the first thing I teach my students in library classes. No bias doesn't exist. A bias is simply a perspective, right? Credibility is the question. Can I believe what someone is saying? Is this true? Okay? Settle your trust. Be skeptical, but not cynical. So, fake news is everywhere. We're living in it now. Somehow the discourse has happened that it's something that happens to us, but we let it happen, we help it happen by sharing, liking, retweeting. This is important, right? To use the tools from tonight to think about new ways of approaching the news. So when I started with this slide. It's the first responsibility of every citizen to question authority. And I said that I was really happy that I came across it when I was prepping for this presentation. You know why? He didn't say it, right? This is not a quote by Benjamin Franklin, okay? This is the environment that we're living in now, okay? This is the kind of thing, I ran this by my husband When I saw this meme, I showed it to him and I was like, look at this. Like, isn't this amazing? Like, way back at the founding of our country, he was saying this. And my husband was like, the guy was like a prophet, wasn't he? And I was like, no, totally made up. And I got him. I got him with it, right? And he was embarrassed. So when you see stuff that makes really good sense to you, dial it back. The first thing he should have said to me was, where did that quote come from, right? So a couple of final thoughts with this. The purpose of this, of fake news, is to make money. In the process, it confuses us, it overwhelms us, it makes us tired, it makes us not want to engage in the news, it makes us not want to engage with each other, right? The more disengaged we are, the easier we are to direct, the easier we are to govern, right? One of my favorite sayings is that democracy is a verb. It's something that we do, right? It's not just a system that we live in. To do democracy, you have to be informed. And to be informed, you have to slow down this torrent of fake news, right? It is not going to slow it down on its own. Facebook is not going to slow it down for you, right? It's up to you to curate your environment. The two questions that I think people should ask, I saw this on a library blog and I thought they were so great. How do you know something? And what do you mean, right? How do you know and what do you mean? Those are the questions that you should ask of all information that you are faced with. I'm really concerned about this stuff. I'm concerned that we're becoming less human, actually, in this process, right? I'm concerned that people don't seem concerned about the fact that they're interacting with bots online. Like, that's not a big deal. It's a huge deal for who we are as people. As Ira said, I lived out of the country for 2 years, and there's nothing like living out of the country to make you realize the good parts of your own country, right? And one of them is a free press and a democratic system. And it sounds squishy and romantic, but it's true, right? But we are not going to have that unless we take steps as citizens to have that. So my overarching concern and why I chose this slide is to remember that you are a human in this process, right? You are a thinking person in this process. Don't trust everything that comes at you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming out on a really crummy night. Thanks. Thank you.